How can we use climate change to our own advantage to improve the natural environment, cities, our society and industries every way possible to boost sustainability and natural abundance? Turning climate pressure into transformative opportunity, a framework for regenerative adaptation. Climate change represents the defining challenge of our era, but viewing it solely as a crisis obscures a crucial reality. The disruptions forcing us to adapt also create unprecedented opportunities to redesign failing systems. The pressure to respond to rising temperatures, shifting precipitation patterns, and ecological upheaval can catalyze transformations that humanity has long needed but lacked the political will or economic incentive to pursue. This essay explores how strategic climate adaptation can drive improvements across ecosystems, cities, agriculture, industry, and social structures, not by minimizing the severity of climate change, but by ensuring our responses create genuinely regenerative outcomes rather than simply managing decline. Ecological adaptation, working with ecosystem shifts. Climate change is fundamentally redrawing the map of where species can survive and thrive. While this causes tragic losses, it also creates opportunities for strategic ecological restoration that can enhance biodiversity and ecosystem function beyond pre-industrial baselines in certain contexts. Northern latitudes are experiencing some of the most dramatic warming on Earth. Regions of Canada, Scandinavia, and Russia now have longer frost-free periods and milder winters. Rather than allowing these areas to develop haphazardly or be exploited purely for resource extraction, this shift presents an opportunity for large-scale reforestation with biodiverse species assemblages. These new forests can serve multiple functions, sequestering atmospheric carbon at scale, creating habitat corridors for species migrating poleward, supporting indigenous land management practices, and establishing resilient ecosystems adapted to future conditions. The key is avoiding monoculture plantations and instead fostering complex forest systems that mimic natural succession. In marine environments, warming waters are making previously inhospitable areas suitable for foundation species like kelp and seagrass. Strategic restoration of these marine forests in newly viable locations can create biodiversity hotspots, nursery grounds for fisheries, and powerful carbon sequestration systems. Kelp forests absorb CO2, buffer ocean acidification locally, provide coastal storm protection, and support complex food webs. Seagrass meadows offer similar benefits while stabilizing sediments and improving water quality. Climate-driven range expansions, if guided by ecological science rather than left to chance, can accelerate the establishment of these critical habitats. Perhaps most controversially, climate change necessitates rethinking species conservation through assisted migration, the intentional relocation of species to areas that are becoming climatically suitable as their historical ranges become uninhabitable. While this practice carries risks and raises profound questions about wilderness and naturalness, it may be the only way to prevent extinctions for species that cannot migrate quickly enough on their own, particularly those blocked by human infrastructure. Done carefully, with extensive ecological modeling and monitoring, assisted migration can establish resilient populations in refugio while maintaining genetic diversity and ecosystem functions. The principle underlying all these ecological strategies is moving beyond passive conservation, simply protecting what remains, toward active regeneration that works with ecological change rather than futilely attempting to freeze ecosystems in place. Urban transformation, climate pressure as a catalyst for green infrastructure. Cities are simultaneously the most vulnerable to climate impacts and the greatest sources of emissions. But this vulnerability creates powerful incentives to redesign urban systems in ways that improve livability, equity, and ecological integration. Extreme heat is becoming a deadly urban phenomenon, with the heat island effect amplifying dangerous temperatures. This crisis is driving adoption of green infrastructure at unprecedented scales. Cities from Singapore to Paris are implementing comprehensive urban forestry programs, recognizing that tree canopy doesn't just cool neighborhoods, it filters air pollution, manages stormwater, provides habitat, improves mental health, and increases property values in ways that benefit entire communities. Green roofs and walls transform buildings from heat-absorbing liabilities into cooling assets, while creating stepping-stone habitats for urban wildlife. These interventions work best when distributed equitably, prioritizing historically underserved neighborhoods that typically have the least tree cover and greatest heat exposure. Flooding from intense rainfall and sea level rises forcing cities to abandon the 20th century model of piping water away as quickly as possible. Instead, leading cities are implementing sponge city concepts that use restored wetlands, rain gardens, permeable pavements, and bioswales to absorb and filter water where it falls. These nature-based solutions provide flood protection while recharging aquifers, filtering pollutants, creating green space, and supporting biodiversity. Copenhagen's cloudburst management plan, for instance, transforms streets into temporary waterways during extreme rain, protecting buildings while creating attractive public spaces during normal conditions. Climate-driven energy demands for cooling and heating create opportunities to redesign urban energy systems entirely. District heating and cooling networks can capture waste heat from industrial processes, data centers, and wastewater treatment, distributing it efficiently while integrating renewable generation and thermal storage. This systems-level approach delivers energy far more efficiently than building-by-building solutions, while enabling higher renewable penetration. When combined with building retrofits that dramatically reduce energy demand, cities can achieve comfort and resilience while eliminating fossil fuel dependence. The crucial factor is ensuring these adaptations don't simply protect wealthy enclaves while leaving vulnerable populations exposed. Climate adaptation investment must prioritize environmental justice, using adaptation as an opportunity to remedy historical inequities rather than entrench them. Agricultural revolution. Climate stress driving regenerative systems. Industrial agriculture is both a major contributor to climate change and highly vulnerable to its impacts. This dual pressure is accelerating a shift toward regenerative practices that could transform food systems for the better. Climate variability, unpredictable rainfall, temperature extremes, shifting seasons, is making monoculture farming increasingly risky and economically unstable. This is driving farmers toward diversified cropping systems, cover cropping, and integrated crop livestock systems that spread risk while building soil health. These regenerative approaches increase organic matter in soil, improving water retention during droughts and drainage during floods, while sequestering significant amounts of atmospheric carbon. Farms managed regeneratively often show greater resilience to climate extremes than conventional operations, maintaining productivity during droughts or excessive rain that devastate neighboring monocultures. Agroforestry, integrating trees with crops or livestock, is experiencing renewed interest as climate impacts intensify. Trees provide windbreaks, stabilize soil, fix nitrogen, provide additional income streams, and create microclimates that buffer temperature extremes. In tropical regions, agroforestry systems can maintain agricultural productivity while restoring forest cover and biodiversity. In temperate regions, silvopasture systems improve animal welfare while sequestering carbon and diversifying farm income. Shifting growing regions, while disruptive, create opportunities to establish perennial crop systems from the start rather than retrofitting annual systems. Perennial grains, legumes, and oilseeds are in development, offering crops that don't require annual tillage, maintain living roots year-round, preventing erosion and building soil, and sequester far more carbon than annual crops. Areas becoming newly agriculturally viable could establish these systems as climate-adapted food production from inception. Precision agriculture technologies, accelerated by the need to manage climate variability, enable dramatically more efficient use of water, nutrients, and energy. Sensors, drones, and AI-driven management systems allow farmers to apply inputs only where and when needed, reducing waste and environmental impact while often improving yields. Initially developed for conventional farming, these tools are increasingly being adapted to enhance regenerative practices. The key is ensuring this agricultural transformation supports farmer livelihoods and food sovereignty, rather than concentrating power in corporate hands, and that it increases rather than decreases global food security, particularly for vulnerable populations. Industrial transformation, decarbonization as innovation driver. The imperative to decarbonize industry is catalyzing technological and systemic innovations with benefits extending far beyond emissions reduction. The circular economy, where materials cycle continuously rather than following a linear extract-use-dispose pattern, is moving from concept to practice, driven partly by climate imperatives. Designing products for disassembly and reuse, establishing reverse logistics systems, and treating waste as feedstock reduces both emissions and resource extraction. Companies from automotive manufacturers to electronics producers are establishing take-back programs and designing for material recovery. This shift has cascading benefits, reduced mining impacts, decreased pollution, lower material costs, and new job categories in repair, refurbishment, and remanufacturing. Climate adaptation infrastructure spending can be designed to multitask, solving multiple problems simultaneously. Solar canals that cover irrigation channels generate renewable energy while reducing evaporation, preserving precious water resources. Biochar production converts agricultural waste into a soil amendment that improves fertility and water retention while sequestering carbon for centuries. Constructed wetlands treat wastewater while providing habitat and flood storage. When we evaluate climate solutions through a multi-benefit lens rather than narrow cost-benefit analysis, previously uneconomic approaches become obvious choices. The hydrogen economy, particularly green hydrogen produced from renewable electricity, offers pathways to decarbonize heavy industry, long-haul transport, and chemical production. While currently expensive, climate pressure is driving investment and innovation that's rapidly reducing costs. Green hydrogen can store renewable energy seasonally, provide industrial heat, produce zero-carbon steel and cement, and fuel shipping and aviation. The infrastructure being built for hydrogen enables other innovations, like synthetic fuels and chemicals produced from captured carbon. Electrification of everything from vehicles to industrial processes, driven by climate targets, is creating economies of scale that make electric technologies cheaper and more efficient. This transition reduces air pollution, enables integration with renewable energy, and creates more efficient systems overall. Electric vehicles, for instance, convert energy to motion far more efficiently than combustion engines, reducing total energy demand even as we shift energy sources. The industrial transformation must be managed as a just transition, ensuring workers in legacy industries have pathways to new opportunities and that the benefits of new technologies are broadly shared rather than captured by a narrow elite. Social restructuring, climate migration and community resilience. Climate change is already driving human migration and will increasingly reshape where and how people live. Managed proactively rather than reactively, this could enable positive social transformations. Many regions experiencing population decline, Rust Belt cities, rural areas facing agricultural mechanization, shrinking towns and aging societies, could welcome climate migrants while revitalizing communities. Strategic resettlement programs could invest in green infrastructure, sustainable housing, and local economic development in receiving communities, creating opportunities for both newcomers and existing residents. This requires moving beyond the crisis framework of climate refugees toward planned, dignified migration that respects human agency while building community resilience. Distributed renewable energy systems, rooftop solar, community wind projects, local microgrids, are becoming economically viable partly due to climate policies and technology improvements driven by decarbonization imperatives. These systems increase energy resilience during extreme weather events while democratizing energy production. Community-owned renewable projects keep energy spending circulating locally and give residents direct stakes in the energy transition. This shift from centralized fossil fuel systems to distributed renewables can increase community autonomy and resilience while reducing emissions. Climate action is creating employment across restoration ecology, building retrofitting, renewable energy installation and maintenance, regenerative agriculture, and circular economy businesses. These jobs are often local and difficult to offshore, provide pathways to middle-class livelihoods, and contribute to genuinely generative work rather than extraction. Ensuring these opportunities are accessible through training programs, apprenticeships, and supportive policies can address economic insecurity while advancing climate goals. The crucial element is ensuring climate adaptation and mitigation increase rather than decrease equity, and that marginalized communities participate in designing solutions rather than having them imposed. The necessity of regenerative thinking. None of this is to minimize the severity of climate change or suggest that its impacts are anything other than catastrophic in many contexts. Species are going extinct, ecosystems are collapsing, communities are being displaced, and people are dying. Climate change is a crisis demanding urgent action to minimize further warming, but within that urgent imperative lies a crucial strategic insight. How we respond matters as much as whether we respond. We can pursue climate adaptation and mitigation that simply tries to preserve failing systems, propping up unsustainable agriculture with ever more inputs, protecting wealthy coastal properties with seawalls that accelerate erosion elsewhere, replacing fossil fuel infrastructure with minimally better alternatives. Or we can use the undeniable pressure of climate change to drive transformations that humanity desperately needs regardless of climate, restoring ecosystems, creating livable cities, building regenerative economies, and establishing just societies. The opportunity before us is to ensure that every climate adaptation makes our world more beautiful, equitable, and abundant rather than simply less bad. This requires rejecting false choices between human flourishing and ecological health, recognizing that they're inextricably linked. It demands systems thinking that sees connections rather than siloed problems, and it necessitates centering justice, ensuring that those who contributed least to climate change and have the fewest resources to adapt are prioritized in our responses. Climate change is forcing transformation whether we choose it or not. The question is whether we'll shape that transformation toward regeneration or simply manage decline. The examples explored here: ecological restoration working with ecosystem shifts, urban redesign creating green infrastructure, agricultural systems building soil health, industrial innovation enabling circularity, and social restructuring increasing resilience, demonstrate that regenerative outcomes are possible. They require intention, investment, political will, and crucially, ensuring that those most affected have power in designing solutions. We cannot stop climate change at this point, only limit how severe it becomes. But we can choose to build the world we need for the climate we have, and in doing so, create systems that would be worth building even in the absence of climate pressure. That is the opportunity embedded within the crisis, not to celebrate climate change, but to ensure our response creates genuine flourishing rather than merely postponing collapse. Climate change is a brutal warning, but it's also a forcing function. It pushes humanity to redesign everything faster than we otherwise would. If we respond intelligently, we can turn disruption into a catalyst for a far more abundant, resilient, and beautiful world. Treat climate change as Earth's feedback signal, not just a threat. Climate change is the planet telling us where systems are fragile, inefficient, or extractive. Rising heat, floods, droughts, and biodiversity loss reveal where redesign delivers the biggest gains. Instead of resisting change everywhere, we can use warming to expand ecosystems into new latitudes. Use extreme events to justify rapid infrastructure upgrades. Use atmospheric CO2 as a raw material, not waste. Use ecological stress to trigger ecosystem restoration at scale. Climate change becomes the map showing where regeneration pays off fastest. Use excess atmospheric CO2 to increase life, not just reduce emissions. CO2 is not poison, it is plant food and a carbon backbone for materials, fuels, and soils. Turning CO2 into abundance. Reforestation plus food forests convert CO2 into biomass, shade, rainfall recycling, and food. Algae and kelp farms turn CO2 into protein, biofuels, fertilizers, plastics, and animal feed. Carbon storing soils, biochar, compost. Regenerative grazing lock carbon underground while multiplying yields. CO2 materials industries turn emissions into concrete, polymers, fuels, and building materials. Instead of a net zero mindset, we move toward net positive carbon ecosystems. Redesign cities as climate-powered ecosystems. Climate stress gives cities political and economic permission to reinvent themselves. Heat urban forests and living architecture. Heat waves justify dense urban tree canopies, green roofs, and vertical forests. Vegetation cools cities, increases rainfall infiltration, cleans air, and boosts mental health. Buildings become photosynthetic skins, producing energy, food, and oxygen. Flooding sponge cities. Flood risk accelerates wetlands, canals, bioswales, permeable streets, and urban lakes. Cities store water like landscapes, preventing disasters while creating beauty and biodiversity. Energy volatility. Local abundance. Distributed solar, wind, geothermal, thermal storage, and biological energy systems reduce grid fragility. Waste heat from industry warms homes, greenhouses, and aquaculture systems. Cities stop fighting nature and start functioning like rainforests. Use climate pressure to accelerate circular, regenerative industries. Climate instability makes make waste systems economically risky. Industrial transformation. Waste becomes feedstock for new industries, carbon, heat, nutrients, materials. Factories become eco-industrial symbiosis hubs, sharing energy, water, and materials. Biological manufacturing, fungi, bacteria, algae, replaces toxic chemistry. Examples: cement that absorbs CO2 instead of emitting it. Bioplastics grown from algae and agricultural waste. Steel powered by green hydrogen and heat recovery. Climate risk becomes a profit signal for regeneration. Let ecosystem migration work for us, not against us. As climates shift, ecosystems naturally move poleward and upward. Smart ecological guidance. Assist forests, wetlands, and species migration using ecological corridors. Replace collapsing monocultures with climate-resilient polycultures. Turn abandoned or degraded land into carbon-rich, biodiverse landscapes. This creates new forests in temperate regions, expanded food production zones, stronger, more resilient ecosystems than before. Transform agriculture into climate-powered carbon sinks. Climate volatility exposes the weakness of industrial agriculture and opens the door to better systems, regenerative food systems. Food forests, agroforestry, and silvopasture stabilize yields under climate stress. Soil carbon increases water retention, reducing drought and flood damage. Localized food systems reduce transport emissions and strengthen communities. Farms become carbon sinks, biodiversity reserves, energy producers, economic stabilizers. Use climate urgency to upgrade society itself. Big threats unlock big social changes that were previously politically impossible. Societal upgrades, universal green infrastructure jobs programs, climate-resilient housing as a human right, education systems centered on ecology, systems thinking, and regeneration, health systems designed around cleaner air, green spaces, and local food. Climate change forces us to build a healthier civilization by default. Turn adaptation into planetary-scale restoration. Adaptation doesn't have to mean retreat, it can mean enrichment. Examples: coastal protection through mangroves, coral restoration, and living shorelines. Desert greening using fog harvesting, solar desalination, and drought-adapted ecosystems. Mountain reforestation to stabilize water cycles and prevent landslides. Every adaptation project doubles as ecosystem repair. The big shift, from minimizing damage to maximizing life. The core mindset change is this: old goal, how do we reduce harm? New goal, how do we use this moment to create the most alive planet possible? Climate change compresses time. It forces innovation, cooperation, and ecological intelligence at a speed humanity has never experienced before. The end result, a hotter planet, but a richer one. If we respond well, cities become cooler than today despite global warming. Biodiversity increases instead of collapsing. Industries become cleaner, more profitable, and more resilient. Society becomes healthier, more equitable, and more connected to nature. Climate change becomes the event that pushed humanity to finally behave like a planetary ecosystem engineer with wisdom, instead of a short-sighted extractor. Climate change as a planetary feedback mechanism. Climate change is not random destruction, it is a large-scale feedback signal generated by Earth's physical and biological systems, responding to human activity. Rising temperatures, altered rainfall patterns, stronger storms, melting ice, and ecosystem stress reveal where human systems are inefficient, extractive, or misaligned with natural processes. When interpreted correctly, these changes indicate precisely where intervention will produce the greatest ecological and societal benefits. Instead of viewing climate change only as a threat to be minimized, it can be treated as diagnostic information that guides redesign at planetary scale. Using excess atmospheric carbon dioxide to increase biological and material abundance. Carbon dioxide is the primary building block of life on Earth and the molecular foundation for plant growth, soils, and biological productivity. Elevated atmospheric carbon dioxide represents a misallocated resource rather than an inherently harmful substance. By redirecting this carbon into living systems and durable materials, humanity can simultaneously stabilize the climate and increase natural abundance. Reforestation, afforestation, and food forest systems convert atmospheric carbon into woody biomass, root systems, and soil organic matter while increasing biodiversity, rainfall recycling, and food production. Algae, seaweed, and kelp farming capture carbon at rates far higher than terrestrial plants and transform it into fuels, proteins, fertilizers, animal feed, pharmaceuticals, and biodegradable plastics. Regenerative agriculture increases soil carbon through composting, cover cropping, reduced tillage, and biochar application, thereby improving soil fertility, water retention, and long-term productivity. Industrial carbon utilization technologies convert carbon dioxide into concrete, polymers, fuels, and structural materials, lock in carbon into long-lived forms while replacing fossil-derived inputs, redesigning cities as climate-responsive living systems. Climate stress provides the political, economic, and social justification to redesign cities fundamentally. Rising temperatures drive the expansion of urban tree canopies, green roofs, green walls, and vegetated corridors that cool cities through evapotranspiration while improving air quality and human health. Buildings can be designed as living structures that integrate plants, solar energy, natural ventilation, and water recycling, allowing architecture to function as part of the ecosystem rather than as an isolated object. Increasing flood risk motivates the creation of sponge cities that absorb, store, and slowly release water through wetlands, canals, permeable streets, and urban lakes. These systems reduce flood damage, recharge groundwater, and support biodiversity while creating attractive public spaces. Energy instability encourages distributed renewable energy systems, including solar, wind, geothermal, thermal storage, and biological energy systems that increase resilience while reducing emissions. Waste heat from industry and data centers can be reused for district heating, greenhouses, and aquaculture, turning inefficiency into productive synergy. Transforming industry through climate-driven circularity. Climate volatility exposes the economic fragility of linear industrial systems that rely on extraction, waste, and long supply chains. In response, industries can be reorganized into circular systems where waste streams become valuable inputs. Eco-industrial clusters allow factories to exchange energy, heat, water, and materials, reducing costs while lowering environmental impact. Biological manufacturing replaces toxic and energy-intensive chemical processes with microbes, fungi, algae, and enzymes that produce materials, fuels, medicines, and construction components at lower temperatures and with minimal waste. Cement and concrete technologies can be redesigned to absorb carbon dioxide during curing rather than releasing it. Metals such as steel can be produced using green hydrogen and recycled at high efficiency, significantly reducing emissions. Climate risk thus becomes an economic incentive for regenerative industrial design rather than a barrier to growth, guiding ecosystem migration and ecological adaptation. As temperatures rise and rainfall patterns shift, ecosystems naturally move toward cooler or wetter regions. Instead of resisting this process, humanity can guide it intelligently. Ecological corridors allow species to migrate safely while maintaining genetic diversity and ecosystem function. Climate-resilient polycultures replace vulnerable monocultures, reducing the risk of collapse and increasing long-term productivity. Degraded and abandoned lands can be restored using native species adapted to future climate conditions, creating new forests, grasslands, and wetlands that stabilize soils, regulate water cycles, and support wildlife. This approach transforms climate-driven ecological change into an opportunity to build stronger and more resilient ecosystems than those that existed before, turning agriculture into a climate stabilization system. Climate change reveals the vulnerability of industrial agriculture to droughts, floods, pests, and soil degradation. In response, regenerative agricultural systems can be deployed at scale. Food forests, agroforestry, and silvopasture integrate trees, crops, and animals into mutually reinforcing systems that stabilize microclimates and protect soils. Increased soil carbon improves water retention, reducing both drought stress and flood damage. Localized food systems reduce transportation emissions while strengthening regional resilience. Farms can also produce energy through biogas, solar installations, and biomass processing, making agriculture a net producer of food, energy, and ecosystem services rather than a net extractor. Using climate urgency to upgrade social systems. Large-scale climate threats create the social and political momentum necessary to implement reforms that improve quality of life. Investments in climate-resilient infrastructure generate millions of stable, meaningful jobs while improving public health and safety. Housing designed for thermal efficiency, natural ventilation, and green integration reduces energy demand while improving living conditions. Education systems can shift toward ecological literacy, systems thinking, and regenerative design, preparing future generations to manage complex planetary systems responsibly. Health systems benefit directly from cleaner air, increased green spaces, and improved nutrition, reducing disease burdens and healthcare costs. Climate action thus becomes a pathway to a healthier and more equitable society, making climate adaptation a form of ecosystem restoration. Adaptation strategies do not need to focus solely on defense and retreat. Coastal protection can be achieved through mangrove forests, salt marshes, and coral reef restoration, which absorb wave energy while supporting fisheries and biodiversity. Desert and semi-arid regions can be regenerated through fog harvesting, solar power desalination, water-efficient irrigation, and drought-adapted plant communities. Mountain reforestation stabilizes slopes, regulates water flow, and reduces landslide risk while increasing carbon storage. Every adaptation investment can therefore be designed to deliver multiple ecological and economic benefits simultaneously, shifting the core goal from damage reduction to life maximization. The fundamental transformation required is a shift in purpose. Rather than focusing exclusively on minimizing harm, humanity can aim to maximize biological productivity, ecosystem health, and long-term resilience. Climate change compresses decision-making timelines and accelerates innovation, forcing rapid adoption of regenerative practices that would otherwise take centuries to implement. When guided wisely, this pressure leads to cooperation across disciplines, nations, and sectors, aligning economic success with ecological restoration, the long-term outcome of an intelligent response. If climate change is approached as a design challenge rather than an existential defeat, cities can become cooler, healthier, and more biodiverse than they are today despite rising global temperatures. Natural ecosystems can expand in area and complexity, industries can become cleaner and more profitable, and societies can become more resilient and equitable. In this scenario, climate change becomes the event that compelled humanity to mature into a civilization capable of enhancing planetary life rather than diminishing it, turning climate change into a catalyst for planetary regeneration. Climate change is commonly framed as an existential crisis that must be resisted, slowed, or reversed in order to preserve human civilization and the natural world. While this framing captures the severity of the threat, it also obscures a deeper and more powerful truth. Climate change is a planetary feedback signal that reveals structural flaws in human systems and creates an unprecedented opportunity to redesign civilization at every level. If humanity responds with ecological intelligence rather than fear, climate change can become the catalyst for a transformation toward a more abundant, resilient, and biologically rich Earth. Rather than focusing solely on damage reduction, an intelligent response to climate change seeks to use the pressures it creates to accelerate regeneration. Rising temperatures, altered rainfall patterns, ecosystem stress, and resource volatility expose inefficiencies in cities, industries, agriculture, and governance. These disruptions provide both the justification and the urgency to replace extractive systems with regenerative ones that align human activity with the fundamental processes of the biosphere. Climate change as Earth's diagnostic system. Earth functions as a complex, self-regulating system composed of atmospheric, geological, chemical, and biological processes. Climate change emerges when these systems are pushed beyond stable operating ranges. In this sense, climate change is not merely an external threat, but an internal diagnostic signal, indicating that human activity has become misaligned with planetary limits. Rising global temperatures highlight inefficiencies in energy systems that waste heat and rely on centralized fossil fuel infrastructure. Intensifying floods reveal urban designs that repel rather than absorb water. Droughts expose agricultural systems dependent on fragile monocultures and degraded soils. Biodiversity loss signals the collapse of ecological networks that support food production, climate regulation, and human health. When interpreted correctly, these signals identify precisely where redesign yields the highest returns. Carbon dioxide as a foundation for abundance. At the center of climate change lies carbon dioxide, a molecule often treated as an enemy rather than as the molecular backbone of life. Carbon dioxide is the primary input for photosynthesis, the process that underpins nearly all ecosystems on Earth. Excess atmospheric carbon dioxide therefore represents misallocated biological potential rather than an inherently destructive substance. By redirecting carbon dioxide into living systems, humanity can increase both climate stability and biological abundance. Large-scale reforestation and afforestation convert carbon into forests that regulate water cycles, stabilize soils, generate rainfall, and support vast biodiversity. Food forests integrate perennial crops, trees, and understory plants to produce diverse nutrition while continuously storing carbon in biomass and soils. Algae and seaweed cultivation capture carbon at rates far exceeding terrestrial plants while producing fuels, proteins, fertilizers, and industrial feedstocks. Beyond biology, carbon can be incorporated into long-lived materials. Carbon-negative concrete, synthetic fuels, polymers, and construction materials transform emissions into assets, allowing industry to function as a carbon sink rather than a source. This shift reframes climate mitigation as an active production rather than sacrifice. Cities as climate-positive ecosystems. Urban areas concentrate human population, energy use, and material flows, making them critical leverage points for climate-driven transformation. Climate stress provides the political and economic justification to redesign cities as living systems rather than inert infrastructure. Rising temperatures drive the expansion of urban forests, green roofs, and vegetated corridors that cool cities through evapotranspiration while improving air quality and mental health. Buildings can be designed to function as biological and energetic systems, integrating solar energy, natural ventilation, water recycling, and plant life into their structure. As flood risks increase, cities can transition into sponge systems that absorb, store, and slowly release water through wetlands, permeable surfaces, and restored waterways. Energy volatility encourages distributed renewable energy systems that increase resilience while reducing emissions. Waste heat from industrial processes and data centers can be reused for heating buildings, greenhouses, and aquaculture systems, turning inefficiency into productive synergy. In this model, cities behave more like forests than machines, cycling resources internally while supporting life. Climate-driven industrial regeneration. Industrial systems built on linear extraction and disposal are increasingly incompatible with a volatile climate. Resource shortages, supply chain disruptions, and regulatory pressure make regenerative design not only environmentally necessary but economically advantageous. Circular industrial systems transform waste streams into inputs, reducing costs while minimizing environmental impact. Eco-industrial parks allow multiple industries to share energy, materials, and water, creating networks that resemble metabolic systems in nature. Biological manufacturing replaces energy-intensive chemical processes with microbes, fungi, and enzymes capable of producing materials at ambient temperatures and pressures. Cement, steel, plastics, and fuels can be redesigned to absorb carbon, utilize renewable energy, and integrate recycling at high efficiency. As climate risk increases, industries that align with regenerative principles gain long-term stability and profitability, while extractive models become increasingly obsolete. Ecosystem adaptation and guided migration. Climate change forces ecosystems to shift geographically as temperature and precipitation patterns change. Rather than attempting to freeze ecosystems in place, humanity can guide this transition intelligently. Ecological corridors enable species migration while maintaining genetic diversity and ecosystem function. Climate-resilient polycultures replace vulnerable monocultures, reducing the risk of collapse and increasing productivity. Degraded lands can be restored using species adapted to future climate conditions, creating ecosystems that are more resilient than those they replace. This approach transforms climate-driven ecological change into an opportunity to increase biodiversity, stabilize landscapes, and enhance ecosystem services at scale. Agriculture as a climate stabilization engine. Agriculture sits at the intersection of climate, ecosystems, and human survival. Climate change exposes the vulnerability of industrial agriculture while highlighting the potential of regenerative alternatives. Food forests, agroforestry, and silvopasture integrate trees, crops, and animals into systems that stabilize microclimates, protect soils, and increase yields over time. Soil carbon acts as both a climate buffer and a productivity multiplier, improving water retention and nutrient cycling. Farms can also generate energy through biogas, solar installations, and biomass processing, making agriculture a net producer of food, energy, and ecosystem services. Social transformation through climate action. The urgency of climate change creates the social momentum necessary for systemic reform. Investments in climate-resilient infrastructure generate employment while improving public health and safety. Housing designed for thermal efficiency and ecological integration reduces energy demand and enhances quality of life. Education systems can prioritize ecological literacy, systems thinking, and regenerative design, preparing future generations to steward planetary systems responsibly. Health outcomes improve as air quality, green space access, and nutrition improve. Climate action thus becomes a vehicle for social renewal rather than deprivation. Adaptation as restoration. Climate adaptation need not focus on retreat and defense alone. Coastal protection through mangrove forests, salt marshes, and coral reef restoration absorbs storm energy while supporting fisheries and biodiversity. Desert greening through water harvesting, solar desalination, and drought-adapted ecosystems transforms marginal lands into productive landscapes. Mountain reforestation stabilizes water cycles and prevents erosion while increasing carbon storage. Each adaptation strategy can be designed to deliver ecological, economic, and social benefits simultaneously. From crisis to evolution, the ultimate shift required is conceptual. Rather than viewing climate change as a failure to be endured, humanity can treat it as an evolutionary pressure that forces civilization to mature. The goal moves from minimizing harm to maximizing life. When guided by ecological intelligence, climate change accelerates innovation, cooperation, and alignment with planetary systems. In this future, cities are cooler and greener than today despite global warming, ecosystems are more diverse and productive, industries are cleaner and more resilient, and societies are healthier and more equitable. Climate change becomes the catalyst that compelled humanity to finally design a civilization capable of enhancing the Earth rather than degrading it. Comprehensive Guide to Climate Adaptive Regenerative Design, Ecological Restoration and Ecosystem-Based Adaptation. Northern Latitude Reforestation Systems. The warming of northern latitudes presents an extraordinary opportunity to establish vast new forest ecosystems that serve multiple ecological and climate functions simultaneously. In regions across Canada, Scandinavia, Russia, and Alaska, temperatures are rising at more than twice the global average rate, extending growing seasons by weeks or even months and pushing the tree line northward into formerly tundra-dominated landscapes. The strategic approach to northern reforestation involves creating mixed-species forests that mimic natural succession patterns rather than establishing single-species plantations. This means beginning with pioneer species like birch, alder, and aspen that can colonize quickly, fix nitrogen in soils, and create microclimates that enable slower-growing climax species like spruce, pine, and fir to establish. These forests should incorporate diversity at multiple scales, including different tree species, varying ages and sizes, understory plants, and deadwood that provides habitat for insects, fungi, and cavity-nesting birds. Such forests function as massive carbon sinks, with young, actively growing forests sequestering carbon at remarkable rates, while mature forests store enormous quantities in both biomass and soil. The soil organic matter layer in boreal forests can extend several feet deep, representing centuries of accumulated carbon that remains stable when forests are managed without clear-cutting. Additionally, these forests regulate local and regional water cycles, with trees transpiring moisture that contributes to cloud formation and precipitation patterns, creating feedback loops that can moderate regional climate. The biodiversity benefits extend beyond the forests themselves. As climate zones shift poleward, many species are attempting to migrate to track their preferred temperature and precipitation ranges. Establishing forested corridors provides pathways for this migration, preventing populations from becoming isolated and maintaining genetic connectivity across landscapes. Species ranging from insects and amphibians to large mammals like moose and caribou benefit from these connected habitats. Indigenous peoples across northern regions have maintained traditional relationships with the boreal ecosystems for millennia, and their involvement in northern reforestation efforts is both ethically essential and practically beneficial. Traditional ecological knowledge includes understanding of fire regimes, sustainable harvest practices, and species relationships that scientific forestry is only beginning to appreciate. Co-management approaches that combine indigenous knowledge with contemporary ecological science produce more resilient and culturally appropriate outcomes. Marine forest restoration in warming waters. Ocean temperatures are rising globally, with some regions experiencing warming that makes them newly suitable for foundation species like kelp and seagrass that previously could not survive there. These marine forests provide ecosystem services comparable to terrestrial forests and in some ways exceed them in ecological value per unit area. Kelp forests are among the most productive ecosystems on Earth, with giant kelp capable of growing up to 2 feet per day under optimal conditions. These towering underwater forests create three-dimensional habitat structure used by hundreds of species, from tiny invertebrates living among the holdfast to fish seeking shelter in the canopy to sea otters resting in the surface fronds. The kelp itself absorbs dissolved carbon dioxide from seawater, helping to buffer ocean acidification in local areas while sequestering carbon in its tissues. When kelp fronds break off and drift into deep water, they can carry this carbon to the ocean floor where it may remain sequestered for centuries. Establishing kelp forests in newly suitable areas requires understanding of substrate requirements, water chemistry, light penetration, and the presence or absence of herbivores like sea urchins that can prevent kelp establishment. Restoration efforts typically involve clearing urchin barrens where these grazers have overpopulated, then either allowing natural kelp recruitment or actively planting kelp on suitable rocky substrate. Once established, healthy kelp forests tend to be self-maintaining, though they require monitoring for disease, herbivore outbreaks, and changes in ocean conditions. Seagrass meadows provide complementary ecosystem services in shallower, softer bottom environments. These marine flowering plants stabilize sediments with their root systems, reducing turbidity and improving water quality. Their dense canopies slow water movement, causing suspended particles to settle out, which further clarifies the water. This positive feedback loop allows seagrass to expand once established. The meadows provide critical nursery habitat for commercially important fish and shellfish species, support populations of threatened species like sea turtles and dugongs, and sequester carbon in both their tissues and the sediments they stabilize. Seagrass meadows can accumulate organic carbon in sediments at rates far exceeding terrestrial forest per unit area, with some meadows containing carbon that has been sequestered for thousands of years. Climate-driven warming is making areas of the North Atlantic, North Pacific, and Southern Ocean newly suitable for these marine forests. Strategic restoration in these regions can establish ecosystems that will become increasingly productive and valuable as waters continue to warm, providing long-term climate resilience while delivering immediate biodiversity and fisheries benefits. Assisted migration and climate refugia management. Traditional conservation focused on protecting species within their historical ranges, but climate change is making many of these ranges uninhabitable faster than species can migrate naturally. Roads, cities, agricultural lands, and other human infrastructure create barriers to natural migration, fragmenting habitats and trapping populations in deteriorating conditions. Assisted migration involves carefully relocating species to areas where climate modeling indicates they will find suitable conditions in the coming decades. This is not a simple transplantation exercise but rather a complex process requiring extensive ecological analysis. Researchers must identify suitable recipient ecosystems that have appropriate climate conditions, soil types, precipitation patterns, and day-length cycles, while also lacking competitors, predators, or pathogens that would prevent establishment. The genetic diversity of source populations must be maintained, often requiring collecting individuals from across a species range to ensure the relocated population has sufficient genetic variation to adapt to new conditions. The practice raises profound philosophical questions about wilderness, naturalness, and human intervention in ecosystems. Critics argue that assisted migration represents playing God with nature, potentially introducing invasive species and disrupting ecosystems. Proponents counter that human-caused climate change has already fundamentally altered what constitutes natural, and that allowing preventable extinctions when we have the knowledge and capability to intervene is itself an ethical choice with consequences. Practical applications of assisted migration are already underway for species ranging from butterflies and turtles to trees and salamanders. The Toria guardians, for instance, have relocated the critically endangered Toria taxifolia, a conifer native to Florida, to sites in North Carolina where climate models suggest suitable habitat. Trials with whitebark pine, a keystone species in western mountain ecosystems threatened by climate change and disease, are establishing populations in more northern ranges. Climate refugia, areas where microclimates or topography create conditions that resist broader climate trends, represent another critical conservation strategy. Deep valleys, north-facing slopes, areas with persistent fog or cloud cover, and sites with cold water springs can maintain cooler, moister conditions even as surrounding landscapes warm and dry. Identifying and protecting these refugia, then potentially establishing corridors connecting them, creates insurance against species loss while maintaining genetic diversity that may prove crucial for future adaptation. These refugia often harbor populations with unique genetic adaptations to local conditions, making them irreplaceable sources of evolutionary potential. Urban green infrastructure and climate-resilient design. Comprehensive urban forestry programs. Urban trees provide a staggering array of benefits that become increasingly critical as cities face heat waves, air pollution, and stormwater management challenges. A mature tree canopy can reduce local air temperatures by 10 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit through evapotranspiration, the process by which trees absorb water through their roots and release it through their leaves. This cooling effect is most pronounced directly beneath tree canopies but extends to surrounding areas, creating neighborhood-scale temperature reductions that can mean the difference between discomfort and dangerous heat exposure for vulnerable populations. Comprehensive urban forestry moves beyond simply planting trees to creating interconnected canopy cover across entire cities. This requires selecting appropriate species for local conditions, considering factors like mature size, root systems compatible with urban infrastructure, resistance to pests and diseases, tolerance for pollution and compacted soils, and climate projections indicating which species will thrive in future conditions. Species diversity is critical. Planting a variety of trees ensures that disease or pest outbreaks affecting one species won't devastate entire neighborhoods, as happened with Dutch elm disease and is currently occurring with emerald ash borer. The infrastructure supporting urban trees is as important as the trees themselves. Traditional street tree plantings often confine roots to small pits that become compacted and waterlogged, severely limiting tree growth and lifespan. Modern approaches use structural soils, suspended pavement systems, and silvicells, modular underground structures that provide rooting space beneath sidewalks and streets. These systems allow trees to develop extensive root systems while supporting pavement loads, resulting in larger, healthier trees that provide greater benefits. Continuous trenches rather than individual pits enable root systems to interconnect, with mycorrhizal fungal networks forming that allow trees to share resources and communicate stress signals. Urban forests also provide critical habitat in otherwise hostile landscapes. Bird populations, insect diversity, and even small mammals can thrive in well-designed urban forests. Native plant understories beneath tree canopies create layered habitats supporting diverse species while also reducing maintenance requirements compared to turf grass. These green corridors enable wildlife movement across urban landscapes, connecting parks and natural areas that would otherwise be isolated islands. The equity dimension of urban forestry cannot be overstated. Studies consistently show that low-income neighborhoods and communities of color have significantly less tree canopy than wealthy areas, a legacy of discriminatory practices like redlining. These disparities translate directly into health outcomes, with residents of low-canopy neighborhoods experiencing higher rates of heat-related illness, respiratory disease, and cardiovascular problems. Prioritizing tree planting in underserved areas addresses environmental justice while providing communities most vulnerable to climate impacts with crucial adaptive infrastructure. Successful programs involve community members in tree selection, planting, and ongoing care, building social cohesion and ensuring that green infrastructure serves community needs. Green roofs and living walls. Building surfaces in cities absorb and radiate enormous quantities of heat, creating urban heat islands where temperatures can be 15 degrees Fahrenheit or more above surrounding rural areas. Green roofs and walls transform these heat-absorbing surfaces into cooling, living ecosystems that provide multiple benefits simultaneously. Green roofs consist of layered systems beginning with waterproofing membranes, then drainage layers, growing medium, and vegetation. Extensive green roofs use shallow growing medium and hardy, low-maintenance plants like sedums, requiring minimal irrigation and maintenance while providing insulation, storm water management, and modest cooling benefits. Intensive green roofs use deeper growing medium and can support diverse plantings including shrubs, grasses, and even small trees, creating rooftop gardens, recreational spaces, and productive urban farms. These systems can retain 50 to 90% of rainfall, dramatically reducing stormwater runoff while filtering pollutants. The vegetation in growing medium provides substantial insulation, reducing heating costs in winter and cooling costs in summer by moderating temperature extremes. Beyond these functional benefits, green roofs create habitat in otherwise barren roofscapes. Native wildflower plantings attract pollinators, providing stepping stone habitats that enable bees, butterflies, and other insects to move through urban landscapes. Bird species including ground nesting plovers and nighthawks use green roofs, particularly when designers incorporate features like gravel areas and woody debris. The biodiversity value increases when green roofs are designed as networks rather than isolated installations, with roofs at varying heights creating connectivity across neighborhoods. Living walls or vertical gardens attach vegetation to building facades, either through modular panel systems with growing medium or through climbing plants supported by structures. These systems cool buildings through shading and evapotranspiration, while dramatically improving air quality by filtering particulates and absorbing pollutants. The acoustic benefits of living walls, absorbing and deflecting sound, make them particularly valuable along busy streets. Some living wall systems incorporate edible plants, turning facades into productive gardens that provide food while beautifying neighborhoods. The implementation of green roofs and walls must consider structural capacity, since vegetated systems add weight that existing buildings may not be designed to support. Retrofitting older buildings may require structural assessment and reinforcement, while new construction can design for green roof loads from the outset. Maintenance requirements, though less than ground-level gardens, still require consideration, including irrigation systems, plant replacement, and occasional weeding. The long-term benefits, extended roof membrane life, energy savings, stormwater fee reductions, and enhanced property values, typically justify these ongoing costs. Sponge cities and integrated water management. The 20th century approach to urban stormwater management treated rainfall as a waste product to be removed as quickly as possible through networks of pipes, gutters, and channels. This approach creates numerous problems, overwhelming treatment systems during heavy rains, causing combined sewer overflows that discharge raw sewage into waterways, eroding stream banks from concentrated discharges, missing opportunities to recharge groundwater, and requiring expensive gray infrastructure that provides no additional benefits. Sponge cities reverse this paradigm, designing urban landscapes to absorb, filter, and slowly release rainfall where it falls rather than shunting it away. This approach integrates numerous components into comprehensive systems that handle water at multiple scales. Rain gardens are shallow depressions planted with native vegetation adapted to both wet and dry conditions. When it rains, water flows into these gardens where it infiltrates into the soil while plants and microorganisms filter pollutants. During dry periods, deep-rooted native plants access the stored moisture. Rain gardens can be scaled from small residential installations to large bioswales along streets and parking lots. The vegetation provides habitat and beautifies spaces while performing critical hydrological functions. Permeable pavements allow water to infiltrate through surface materials into underlying aggregate storage layers. Technologies include porous asphalt and concrete, permeable pavers with gaps that vegetation can colonize, and grid systems that support vehicle loads while maximizing pervious surface area. These systems reduce runoff volume and peak flows while filtering pollutants and recharging groundwater. They work particularly well in parking lots, sidewalks, alleys, and low-traffic streets. Constructed wetlands recreate the water quality and flood storage functions of natural wetlands in urban contexts. These engineered systems use shallow pools with wetland vegetation to slow water, allow sediments to settle, and enable biological processes that break down pollutants. Wetlands provide habitat for amphibians, birds, and invertebrates while creating attractive amenity spaces. They can be designed to remain wet year-round or to fill only during rain events, depending on site conditions and objectives. Blue-green corridors integrate water management with green space by creating linear parks along waterways and natural drainage paths. These corridors preserve and restore stream functions, provide flood storage during extreme events, create recreational amenities, and establish wildlife habitat corridors through urban areas. Cities like Philadelphia and Portland have transformed culverted streams back into daylit waterways with vegetated buffers, improving water quality while creating valued public spaces. At larger scales, cities are preserving and restoring wetlands, floodplains, and urban forests specifically for their water management functions. These natural systems provide storage capacity during extreme events that would cost billions to replicate with gray infrastructure, while delivering biodiversity, recreation, and climate regulation benefits that pipes and tanks never could. Copenhagen's cloudburst management plan exemplifies integrated approaches. The city designed streets, plazas, and parks to temporarily hold water during extreme rainfall, with surfaces that route water to retention areas while keeping it away from buildings. During normal conditions, these spaces function as attractive public realms. This dual-purpose design costs less than expanding pipe capacity while creating community benefits beyond flood protection. District energy systems and urban microgrids. Traditional building-by-building heating and cooling approaches are inherently inefficient, with each structure operating independent system sized for peak loads that occur only occasionally. District energy systems aggregate heating and cooling demand across multiple buildings, enabling centralized production and distribution that achieves economies of scale, higher efficiency, and fuel flexibility impossible in distributed systems. District heating networks circulate hot water or steam through insulated pipes to connected buildings, which extract heat through heat exchangers. These systems can utilize waste heat from industrial processes, power generation, wastewater treatment, or data centers, energy that would otherwise be discarded. They can incorporate large-scale solar thermal collectors, geothermal systems, and thermal energy storage that shifts heating load to match renewable energy availability. Combined heat and power plants that generate electricity while capturing waste heat for distribution can achieve overall efficiency exceeding 90%, far beyond conventional separated systems. District cooling systems similarly circulate chilled water for air conditioning, often using thermal storage tanks that create ice at night when electricity is cheaper and renewable generation is abundant. Then melt this ice during hot afternoons to meet cooling demand. This load shifting reduces peak electricity demand, enabling higher renewable energy integration and reducing strain on electrical grids. Some innovative systems use deep lake or ocean water for cooling, requiring minimal energy input while providing reliable, renewable cooling capacity. The integration of district energy with renewable electricity generation and storage creates urban microgrids capable of operating independently during grid disruptions while optimizing energy use under normal conditions. Battery storage, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and demand response systems that modulate building energy consumption combine into intelligent networks that maximize efficiency and resilience. These systems particularly benefit dense urban cores, where building energy demands are concentrated and infrastructure investments serve many users. Retrofitting existing cities with district energy requires coordinating with street reconstruction projects to install piping networks cost-effectively, negotiating connections with anchor loads like universities and hospitals that can provide base demand, and ensuring regulatory frameworks allow private companies or municipal utilities to operate these systems profitably. New developments can design for district energy from inception, incorporating connection requirements into building codes and coordinating infrastructure installation with initial construction. The climate benefits extend beyond emissions reductions. District energy systems using waste heat and renewable sources eliminate local air pollution from building heating, dramatically improving urban air quality. The reduced energy demand from efficiency gains means less total generation capacity needed, whether renewable or conventional. The ability to integrate intermittent renewable generation through thermal storage helps solve one of the key challenges to deep decarbonization. Regenerative agriculture and food systems, diversified cropping systems and polycultures. Industrial agriculture's reliance on vast monocultures creates systems exquisitely vulnerable to climate variability while degrading soil health, depleting water resources, and eliminating habitat. Diversified systems that grow multiple crops either simultaneously or in planned rotations create resilience through redundancy and complementary relationships between species. Intercropping grows two or more crops together in the same field, carefully selected for compatible growth patterns and resource use. Classic combinations include corn, beans, and squash. The Three Sisters system developed by indigenous North American farmers. Corn provides vertical structure for beans to climb, beans fix atmospheric nitrogen that fertilizes the other crops, and squash spreads horizontally to shade soil and suppress weeds. Modern applications include growing nitrogen-fixing legumes alongside grain crops, undersowing cash crops with cover crops that emerge after harvest, and planting pest-confusing mixtures that disrupt insect life cycles. These systems make efficient use of resources by selecting species with different root depths that access water and nutrients from different soil layers, varying light requirements so that shade-tolerant species grow beneath taller neighbors, and sequential maturation that keeps soil covered and productive across seasons. The diversity confounds pest and disease outbreaks that spread rapidly through monocultures, reducing or eliminating pesticide requirements. Beneficial insects, birds, and other predators find the habitat diversity they need to thrive, providing natural pest control. Crop rotations cycle different species through fields across years, breaking pest and disease cycles that build up when the same crop occupies a field continuously. Strategic rotations include deep-rooted crops that break up compacted soil layers and access nutrients from depth, followed by shallow-rooted crops that utilize the improved soil structure. Rotations incorporating perennial forages or cover crops interrupt weed cycles while building soil organic matter. The planning complexity increases significantly compared to monocultures, requiring farmers to manage market timing, equipment needs, and agronomic requirements for multiple species. However, yields often increase even as input costs decline, particularly in systems that have built soil health over time. Cover cropping plants fields with vegetation during periods when they would otherwise sit bare between cash crops. Winter cover crops protect soil from erosion, capture nutrients that would otherwise leach away, suppress weeds, and add organic matter when terminated in spring. Species like tillage radishes develop thick taproots that penetrate compacted layers, creating channels that improve drainage and rooting for subsequent crops. Legume cover crops fix nitrogen, reducing or eliminating fertilizer requirements. The diversity of cover crop species available allows farmers to select for specific soil improvement goals while matching climate conditions and management capabilities. These diversified systems buffer against climate variability because different species respond differently to weather extremes. Drought might reduce corn yields while beans produce normally. Excessive rain might favor one crop while damaging another. Over time and across acres, this diversity stabilizes production and income compared to betting entirely on a single crop's performance. Regenerative grazing and silvopasture. Conventional livestock production often concentrates animals at densities far beyond what land can sustainably support, requiring intensive inputs and creating waste management challenges while degrading pastures. Regenerative grazing systems mimic the movement patterns of wild herbivore herds, using high-density, short-duration grazing followed by extended rest periods to invigorate grasslands while building soil health. The principle draws from observations of wild grazing systems where large herbivore herds move constantly, intensively grazing and trampling vegetation in compact areas before moving on, not returning until plants had fully recovered. This disturbance stimulates plant growth, with grazing triggering new shoot production and trampling incorporating organic matter into soil. The herd impact breaks up biological soil crusts and creates pockmarked surfaces that capture rainfall. The extended rest periods between grazings allow plants to fully regrow, accumulate energy reserves in roots, and develop deep root systems. Implementing regenerative grazing requires subdividing pastures into multiple paddocks, moving livestock frequently, sometimes daily or even multiple times daily. Electric fencing makes this paddock subdivision economical. Stocking rates can be higher than continuous grazing because animals only occupy each paddock briefly, and the intensive trampling and manure deposition during these brief periods actually benefits rather than damages vegetation when followed by adequate rest. Well-managed systems increase forage production substantially compared to continuous grazing, often doubling or tripling carrying capacity while improving soil health indicators. Soil organic matter increases as plant root systems develop more extensively and as manure incorporation feeds soil biology. Water infiltration improves dramatically as soil structure develops, allowing rangelands to absorb and store rainfall rather than shedding it as runoff. This improves drought resilience, with well-managed grasslands maintaining productivity during dry spells that devastate continuously grazed pastures. Silvopasture integrates trees into grazing systems, combining livestock production with timber, nuts, fruits, or other tree products. The trees provide shade that improves animal comfort and performance during hot weather, create windbreaks that moderate temperature extremes, and produce additional income streams that diversify farm economics. Tree rows planted across slopes reduce erosion and provide wildlife habitat. The combination of deep tree roots and shallow grass roots creates complementary resource use, with trees accessing moisture and nutrients from depth while grasses utilize surface resources. Different tree species suit different objectives and climates. Walnut and chestnut trees produce valuable timber and nuts. Mulberry and carob provide livestock fodder from leaves and pods. Conifer windbreaks protect animals while eventually providing timber. Spacing and arrangement determine how much the tree shade pasture grasses, with widely spaced trees in hot climates providing beneficial shade while still allowing adequate grass growth. Establishing silvopasture requires protecting young trees from browsing animals using fencing or tree guards until they're large enough to withstand grazing pressure. The time lag before trees provide significant benefits requires patience and planning, but the long-term productivity, resilience, and carbon sequestration benefits justify the investment. Mature silvopasture systems sequester carbon in tree biomass and soil while maintaining or improving livestock production compared to conventional pastures. Perennial crop development and implementation. Annual crops dominate modern agriculture. Plants that must be seeded every year, grow for a single season, then die after harvest. This annual cycle necessitates regular tillage that destroys soil structure, kills beneficial soil organisms, and releases stored carbon. Bare soil between plantings erodes and loses nutrients. The shallow root systems of annual crops require irrigation and fertilization. Perennial crops grow year after year from the same root systems, fundamentally changing agricultural ecology. After establishment, perennial fields maintain living root systems continuously, feeding soil microbiomes year-round and building rather than depleting soil organic matter. Deep root systems access water and nutrients far below the reach of annuals, reducing irrigation needs and buffering against drought. The elimination of annual tillage prevents erosion, preserves soil structure, and keeps carbon sequestered in soil. Research institutions are developing perennial versions of major crops including wheat, rice, sorghum, and oilseeds through both selective breeding of wild perennial relatives and genetic modification of annual crops to confer perennial characteristics. Kernza, a perennial wheatgrass relative, is already commercially available, producing grain yields that are currently lower than annual wheat but rapidly improving through breeding. The total system productivity, considering grain plus the extensive root systems and soil improvements, potentially exceeds annual systems even at current grain yields. Regions becoming newly suitable for agriculture due to climate change represent ideal places to establish perennial crop systems from inception, rather than transitioning from annual systems. Northern areas with extended growing seasons, regions with altered precipitation patterns favoring new crops, and marginal lands where annual cropping struggles can potentially support perennial systems that build soil while producing food. Perennial polycultures combine multiple perennial species and systems designed to mimic natural prairie ecology while producing food. The Land Institute's pioneering work demonstrates that mixtures of perennial grains, legumes, and oilseeds can produce substantial yields while building soil, supporting biodiversity, and sequestering carbon at rates far exceeding annual crops. These systems require different harvesting equipment and processing infrastructure than conventional agriculture, and market development remains a challenge, but the ecological benefits justify continued development. Precision agriculture and climate-smart technologies. Digital technologies are transforming agriculture's ability to manage variability and optimize resource use, capabilities increasingly critical as climate change makes weather and pest patterns less predictable. Precision agriculture uses data from sensors, satellites, and equipment to make site-specific management decisions at field or even plant-level resolution. Soil sensors measure moisture, nutrients, temperature, and electrical conductivity at numerous points across fields, revealing variations in soil properties that affect crop growth. This allows variable rate application of seeds, fertilizers, and amendments, applying more in areas where crops need additional support and less where conditions are already optimal. The reduction in total inputs saves money while reducing environmental impacts from excess fertilizer running off into waterways. Drone and satellite imagery provides frequent, high-resolution data on crop health, identifying stress from pests, diseases, drought, or nutrient deficiency before it becomes visible to ground observers. Multispectral and hyperspectral sensors detect subtle changes in plant reflectance that indicate specific problems, enabling targeted interventions rather than blanket applications of pesticides or fertilizers across entire fields. Early detection allows smaller-scale interventions that prevent problems from spreading. GPS-guided equipment plants seeds with centimeter accuracy, enabling precise row spacing and plant populations optimized for specific field zones. Automated section control prevents overlapping applications of seeds and chemicals, eliminating waste. Robotic weeders use computer vision to distinguish crops from weeds, mechanically removing weeds without herbicides. These technologies are becoming economically accessible, even for smaller operations as costs decline and equipment-sharing cooperatives emerge. Weather monitoring and forecasting integration helps farmers time operations, planting, irrigating, spraying, for optimal conditions, reducing failures and improving efficiency. Irrigation systems with soil moisture sensors and weather-based controllers apply water only when crops need it, reducing waste while maintaining yields. This precise water management becomes critical as drought frequency and intensity increase. Data integration platforms combine information from all these sources, using artificial intelligence to generate recommendations for specific fields and conditions. These systems learn from outcomes, continuously improving predictions and recommendations. Importantly, these tools increasingly support regenerative and organic practices, not just conventional farming. Precision cover crop seeding, variable rate compost application, and optimized grazing management benefit from the same technologies developed for conventional agriculture. The key is ensuring these technologies serve farmers' interests rather than consolidating control in corporate hands, protecting farmer data ownership, and making tools accessible across scale and financial capacity. Open source platforms, cooperative ownership structures, and public research institutions developing farmer-focused tools can democratize access to technologies that improve both economic and environmental outcomes. Industrial transformation and circular economy, material cycling and closed-loop manufacturing. The linear industrial model: extract raw materials, manufacture products, use them briefly, then discard them, creates enormous waste streams while continuously depleting finite resources and generating emissions at every stage. Circular economy approaches close these loops, treating end-of-life products as raw materials for new manufacturing. Design for disassembly creates products engineered for easy separation of components and materials at end of life. This contrasts with conventional design that prioritizes ease of assembly and manufacturing cost, often using permanent adhesives, complex composite materials, and integrated components impossible to separate. Circular design uses mechanical fasteners, modular components, material labeling, and standardized connections that allow efficient disassembly. Products document their material composition, making sorting and recycling straightforward. Manufacture or take-back programs establish reverse logistics systems where companies reclaim products from customers, either at end of life or for upgrading and refurbishment. This gives manufacturers incentive to design for longevity and recyclability, since they bear the cost of dealing with waste. Some companies shift to service models where customers purchase product function rather than ownership, leasing lighting, heating, or mobility rather than buying bulbs, furnaces, or cars. Under these models, manufacturers maintain ownership and responsibility for products throughout their life cycles, aligning their economic interests with durability and resource efficiency. Industrial symbiosis creates networks where waste from one process becomes feedstock for another. Chemical plants exchange byproducts, manufacturers share waste heat, and recycling facilities process industrial scrap into raw materials. The Kalundborg symbiosis in Denmark exemplifies this approach, with a power plant, oil refinery, pharmaceutical plant, and other facilities exchanging water, steam, gas, and material streams in an integrated industrial ecosystem that dramatically reduces total resource consumption and waste. Material innovation focuses on alternatives to virgin extraction, developing products from recycled materials, agricultural waste, and other renewable sources, bioplastics from crop wastes, building materials from mycelium fungi, textiles from agricultural residues, and chemicals from captured carbon demonstrate possibilities for replacing fossil-derived materials with renewable alternatives that can safely return to biological cycles. The key infrastructure requirements include collection systems that efficiently gather end-of-life products, sorting facilities that separate materials at high purity, reprocessing capacity that transforms waste into usable materials, and markets for recycled materials that incentivize collection and processing. Policy interventions including extended producer responsibility, recycled content mandates, and waste disposal regulations create economic drivers for circularity. Multi-benefit climate infrastructure. Climate adaptation infrastructure can be designed to solve multiple problems simultaneously rather than addressing single issues in isolation. This multi-benefit approach often makes projects economically viable that would fail narrow cost-benefit analysis while creating more resilient and productive systems. Solar canals install photovoltaic panels on structures spanning irrigation canals and aqueducts, generating renewable electricity while reducing water evaporation from exposed canal surfaces. In arid regions, evaporative losses from open canals can exceed 10% annually, enormous volumes of water lost to the atmosphere. Covering these canals with solar panels shades the water, reducing evaporation while the water cools the panels, improving electrical generation efficiency. The existing right-of-way means no additional land is required, and grid connection infrastructure often already exists along canal routes. India has implemented solar canal projects at scale, generating thousands of megawatts while conserving millions of gallons of water annually. Biochar production converts agricultural and forestry waste into a stable charcoal-like substance through pyrolysis, heating organic matter in the absence of oxygen. This process generates energy that can displace fossil fuels while producing a soil amendment that improves fertility, water retention, and carbon sequestration. Biochar's porous structure provides habitat for beneficial soil microorganisms, increases cation exchange capacity that helps soil retain nutrients, and improves soil structure. Perhaps most importantly, biochar is extremely stable, with carbon remaining sequestered for centuries or millennia rather than decomposing and returning to the atmosphere. Adding biochar to agricultural soils or using it in mine reclamation, contaminated site remediation, or wetland restoration creates long-term carbon sinks while improving outcomes for the primary use. Constructed wetlands for wastewater treatment process sewage and industrial effluent through biological systems rather than energy-intensive chemical treatment. These wetlands use plant uptake, microbial decomposition, and filtration through soil and plant roots to remove pollutants, achieving treatment quality comparable to conventional facilities at lower cost and energy use. The wetlands provide wildlife habitat, create recreational and educational amenities, and can generate products like cultivated wetland plants or fish from polishing ponds. Municipal systems from small towns to major cities use constructed wetlands either as primary treatment or to polish conventionally treated water to higher quality before discharge. Green corridors and wildlife crossings over or under highways serve multiple functions simultaneously. They reduce wildlife vehicle collisions, improve human safety, and enable animal movement across landscapes fragmented by roads. When designed with native plantings, they provide habitat and connectivity for species whose ranges are bisected by infrastructure. They can incorporate stormwater management features, filter runoff before it reaches streams, and create recreational trails. These corridors often follow natural drainages, providing flood storage while re-establishing stream connectivity that roads interrupted. The principle underlying all these approaches is evaluating infrastructure investments through multiple lenses: climate mitigation, adaptation, biodiversity, water quality, air quality, public health, recreation, economic development, and designing systems that deliver benefits across all relevant dimensions. This requires integrated planning processes that break down silos between departments and disciplines, involve communities in identifying desired outcomes, and accept higher upfront costs for greater long-term value. Green hydrogen economy. Hydrogen produced from renewable electricity through electrolysis offers pathways to decarbonize industrial processes, transportation modes, and energy storage that are difficult to electrify directly. While currently more expensive than fossil-derived hydrogen, costs are declining rapidly as electrolyzer technology improves and renewable energy becomes cheaper. Industrial applications for green hydrogen include steel production, where hydrogen can replace coal as the reducing agent that converts iron ore to iron, eliminating the largest industrial source of carbon emissions. Cement manufacturing can use hydrogen combustion for process heat, dramatically reducing emissions from this critical but carbon-intensive industry. Ammonia production for fertilizer currently uses hydrogen from natural gas. Substituting green hydrogen eliminates emissions from this sector, while producing ammonia that can itself serve as a hydrogen carrier and carbon-free fuel. Transportation applications include long-haul trucking, shipping, and aviation, modes where battery electric solutions face range and weight constraints. Hydrogen fuel cells convert hydrogen to electricity on board vehicles, providing range comparable to fossil fuels with refueling times far shorter than battery charging. Shipping can use hydrogen directly in internal combustion engines or fuel cells, or use hydrogen-derived fuels like ammonia that avoid hydrogen storage challenges. Aviation can potentially use hydrogen directly for medium-range flights or synthesized hydrocarbon fuels for long-range applications, where hydrogen's low energy density per volume creates challenges. Energy storage represents another critical application. Hydrogen can be produced when renewable generation exceeds demand, stored in underground caverns, depleted gas fields, or purpose-built tanks, then converted back to electricity through fuel cells or combustion turbines when renewable generation is insufficient. This seasonal storage capability, holding energy for weeks or months rather than hours or days, addresses renewable intermittency at timescales battery storage cannot match economically. Converting surplus summer solar generation to hydrogen that provides winter heating and electricity makes renewable energy systems viable at latitudes with extreme seasonal variation. The infrastructure requirements are substantial: electrolyzers to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, storage systems to hold hydrogen safely, pipelines or other transport infrastructure to deliver hydrogen to users, and end-use equipment like fuel cells, turbines, or modified industrial processes. Existing natural gas infrastructure can often be repurposed for hydrogen with modifications, reducing infrastructure costs. Co-locating electrolyzers with renewable generation reduces transmission needs and grid integration costs. The efficiency considerations are important: converting electricity to hydrogen, storing it, then converting back to electricity loses substantial energy compared to direct electricity use or battery storage. This round-trip efficiency of 30 to 50% makes hydrogen unsuitable for applications where direct electrification works well. However, for applications where electrification is impractical and the alternative is continued fossil fuel use, green hydrogen's emissions benefits justify the efficiency penalty. Electrification and grid integration. Electrifying energy end uses from transportation to industrial heat enables decarbonization as electrical generation shifts to renewables, while often improving efficiency compared to direct fossil fuel combustion. This transformation requires not just deploying new equipment but redesigning energy systems for bidirectional flows, distributed generation, and time-varying supply. Electric vehicles achieve 3 to 4 times the efficiency of internal combustion vehicles, converting energy to motion far more effectively while eliminating local air pollution and enabling renewable charging. Beyond transportation benefits, vehicle batteries represent enormous distributed storage capacity that can support grid stability through vehicle-to-grid services. Electric vehicles charged during periods of high renewable generation and low demand can discharge to support grids during peak demand or low renewable output, with owners compensated for providing this service. This integration allows higher renewable penetration while improving grid reliability. Heat pumps for building heating and cooling move heat rather than generating it through combustion, achieving efficiencies of 300% or higher, delivering 3 or more units of heating or cooling for each unit of electricity consumed. This performance advantage over combustion heating makes heat pumps cheaper to operate despite electricity costing more per unit energy than natural gas in many markets. Heat pumps work through refrigeration cycles similar to air conditioners, and modern designs operate efficiently even in very cold climates that previously required resistance heating or fossil fuel backup. Industrial electrification faces greater challenges since many processes require very high temperatures or have special chemistry requirements. However, electric arc furnaces for steel recycling, induction heating for metal processing, and resistance heating for various industrial processes demonstrate feasibility. Combined with hydrogen for processes requiring reducing environments or very high temperatures, industrial electrification can dramatically reduce emissions while often improving process control and product quality. Grid modernization enables this electrification through smart meters, advanced sensors, and control systems that manage complex, decentralized energy systems. Demand response systems modulate consumption to match renewable generation, shifting flexible loads like water heating, electric vehicle charging, and some industrial processes to times of high renewable output. Energy management systems optimize building operations, preheating or pre-cooling when electricity is cheap and abundant, then coasting through expensive peak periods. Microgrids cluster distributed generation, storage, and loads into systems that can operate independently or in connection with main grids. Critical facilities like hospitals, military bases, and emergency services use microgrids for resilience, ensuring power during grid disruptions. Community microgrids can serve neighborhoods, providing local reliability while contributing to broader grid stability. The proliferation of microgrids creates more resilient energy systems less vulnerable to widespread outages. The integration challenges include managing voltage and frequency stability with variable renewable generation, coordinating millions of distributed resources, cybersecurity for increasingly connected systems, and ensuring equitable access to benefits. Solving these challenges requires technical innovation in power electronics, energy storage, and control algorithms, along with regulatory frameworks that incentivize flexibility and reliability rather than simply maximizing generation capacity. Social systems and community resilience. Planned climate migration and resettlement. Climate change is already displacing communities through sea level rise, drought, extreme heat, and ecosystem collapse. Waiting until displacement becomes emergency creates humanitarian crises, wastes resources, and traumatizes affected populations. Planned migration programs, while ethically and politically complex, offer pathways to dignified relocation that benefits both migrants and receiving communities. Successful programs require years of planning, beginning with vulnerable community engagement to understand priorities, cultural connections to place, and preferences for relocation. Simply moving people fails. Successful relocation preserves community cohesion, enables economic opportunity, and respects cultural practices. This might mean relocating entire communities together, ensuring proximity to sacred sites or traditional resources, or phasing migration to allow gradual adaptation. Receiving community preparation is equally critical. Regions with population decline, industrial areas that have lost major employers, rural communities facing agricultural mechanization, towns where aging populations exceed youth, can benefit from new residents who revitalize housing markets, fill labor needs, and justify infrastructure investments. However, arriving populations need services, housing, and economic opportunities. Receiving communities need resources to expand capacity. Investment in receiving communities should create sustainable, climate-resilient infrastructure from the outset. Rather than replicating sprawling, car-dependent development patterns, new growth can embody principles of walkability, mixed-use development, green infrastructure, and renewable energy integration. This represents opportunity to build climate-adapted communities rather than recreating vulnerabilities. Economic development in receiving areas should focus on regenerative industries, ecological restoration, sustainable forestry, renewable energy installation and maintenance, local food systems, and value-added manufacturing using regional resources. This creates meaningful work while building rather than depleting regional resources. Social enterprises, cooperatives, and local ownership structures can ensure wealth stays in communities rather than extracting to distant shareholders. The ethical dimensions are profound. Who decides when relocation is necessary versus premature? How are receiving locations selected and by whom? What rights do migrants have versus existing community members? How are cultural connections to ancestral lands preserved or honored? What compensation is owed to those displaced by others' emissions? These questions have no simple answers but require wrestling with if migration is to be just rather than merely expedient. Indigenous communities facing climate displacement raise additional considerations given historical forced relocations and ongoing sovereignty struggles. Meaningful consultation, self-determination in relocation decisions, and resources adequate to maintain cultural practices are minimum requirements. Some nations are pursuing innovative arrangements including land exchanges, preservation of fishing rights in traditional areas even after relocation, and maintenance of sacred sites. Community energy resilience and democratic ownership. Centralized energy systems create vulnerabilities during extreme weather events that climate change is making more frequent and severe. Distributed generation and storage, organized at community scales, can maintain essential services during grid disruptions while democratizing energy ownership and keeping economic benefits local. Community solar projects allow households without suitable roofs or financial capacity to invest in shared solar installations, receiving credits on electricity bills for their ownership shares. These projects expand solar access beyond homeowners with ideal roof conditions, advancing energy equity while building local renewable capacity. Siting projects on school roofs, parking structures, or marginal land creates additional community benefits and demonstrates local commitment to sustainability. Local microgrids integrate distributed generation, battery storage, and critical facilities into systems capable of operating independently during grid outages. Rather than individual buildings having backup generators, microgrids can maintain power to entire neighborhoods, including essential services, medical facilities, and emergency shelters. During normal operations, these microgrids provide grid services like voltage support and peak demand reduction, generating revenue that offsets infrastructure costs. Community ownership structures including cooperatives, municipal utilities, and community benefit corporations ensure that energy system benefits accrue locally rather than extracting to distant shareholders. Local ownership creates accountability to community needs, enables reinvestment of profits into system improvements or community projects, and builds local expertise in energy systems. The more than 900 electric cooperatives serving rural America demonstrate viability of member-owned utilities. Many are now transitioning to renewable energy at rates exceeding investor-owned utilities. The resilience benefits extend beyond blackout prevention. Communities with local energy resources and ownership have greater autonomy over their futures, insulation from global energy price volatility, and means to direct energy development consistent with local values. This self-determination becomes increasingly valuable as climate disruptions create energy supply uncertainty. Technical challenges include coordinating distributed resources, managing islanded operation during grid outages, and ensuring protection systems prevent backfeeding power into grid lines during maintenance. Modern inverters, smart controls, and communication systems solve these technical challenges, though costs currently exceed simple grid-connected systems. Policy and regulatory barriers often exceed technical challenges, with incumbent utilities sometimes blocking community energy projects that threaten centralized business models. Successful programs couple technical deployment with workforce development, training local workers to install, maintain, and operate systems. This creates local jobs while building community capacity. Inclusive programs ensure that benefits reach low-income households, renters, and communities historically excluded from energy investment, addressing rather than reinforcing energy inequity. Climate-adapted economic development. Economic development in climate-changed world should focus on activities that build resilience, restore ecosystems, and improve community well-being rather than simply maximizing GDP growth. This requires rethinking what constitutes productive work and valuable economic activity. Ecological restoration represents enormous employment opportunity as degraded landscapes require rehabilitation. Wetland restoration, stream daylighting, invasive species removal, native plant propagation and planting, erosion control, and habitat enhancement create meaningful outdoor work while healing damaged ecosystems. These jobs resist automation, require local knowledge, and build rather than extract value. Public funding through infrastructure programs, carbon markets, or environmental trust funds can scale restoration employment substantially. Regenerative agriculture and food systems create additional rural employment, as diversified farms require more labor than mechanized monocultures. Processing and value-added production of regional foods, farmers' market operations, food hubs that aggregate and distribute local products, and agritourism generate economic activity while strengthening regional food security. Urban agriculture, while limited in absolute production, creates community food access, education opportunities, and green space in food deserts. Circular economy businesses including repair cafes, refurbishment centers, remanufacturing facilities, and materials recovery operations create skilled jobs while reducing waste and resource consumption. These activities were historically economically marginal when virgin materials were artificially cheap. Policy shifts that internalize environmental costs make circular businesses competitive while creating employment. Energy efficiency retrofitting of existing buildings represents decades of work improving insulation, air sealing, window replacement, and mechanical system upgrades. This work is inherently local, resistant to offshoring, and creates immediate value through reduced energy costs. Coupling retrofits with health improvements, lead paint remediation, mold removal, ventilation improvements, enhances outcomes while addressing environmental justice. Care economy expansion, childcare, elder care, education, healthcare, creates meaningful employment meeting genuine human needs while building community resilience. These services are essential for functioning communities and become more critical as climate disruptions strain families. Public investment in care infrastructure creates quality jobs while enabling other forms of economic participation. The key is ensuring this economic development increases rather than decreases equity, provides living wages and dignified working conditions, and builds community assets rather than extracting wealth. Cooperative ownership, social enterprises, participatory planning processes, and community wealth building strategies can structure development to serve community interests, building social capital and community cohesion. Climate adaptation requires collective action, mutual support, and social trust, resources that have eroded in many communities through decades of individualization, atomization, and social fragmentation. Rebuilding social capital becomes infrastructure as essential as physical systems. Community organizing around climate adaptation creates opportunities for relationship building while addressing tangible challenges. Neighborhood resilience networks map vulnerable residents, identify community assets, plan mutual aid during emergencies, and organize preparedness activities. The social connections formed through these efforts prove valuable during crises and in everyday life, reducing isolation and building community cohesion. Participatory planning processes for adaptation projects ensure that affected communities shape solutions rather than having them imposed. This builds ownership, ensures solutions address actual priorities, and develops community capacity for collective action. While participatory processes take longer than expert-driven planning, the resulting buy-in and appropriateness justify the investment. Shared spaces, community gardens, tool libraries, community centers, public squares, create opportunities for casual interaction and relationship formation. These spaces serve multiple functions while enabling the informal encounters that build social networks. During crises, communities with strong social networks respond more effectively, with neighbors checking on each other, sharing resources, and collectively solving problems. Cultural activities including festivals, celebrations, arts programs, and storytelling create shared identity and belonging while making climate engagement emotionally resonant rather than purely technical. Stories of adaptation successes, artistic responses to climate challenges, and cultural traditions of resilience connect people emotionally to collective endeavors. The challenge is ensuring social capital building reaches beyond existing networks to include marginalized populations historically excluded from community power structures. Intentional inclusion, addressing language barriers, providing childcare and transportation, and centering traditionally excluded voices requires ongoing effort and resources. Without this intentionality, community resilience efforts can reinforce existing inequities rather than addressing them. These comprehensive adaptive designs represent not a complete catalog, but rather illustrative examples of how climate pressures can drive genuinely regenerative transformations across ecosystems, cities, agriculture, industry, and social systems. The common threads running through all these approaches include working with rather than against natural processes, designing for multiple benefits simultaneously, centering equity and justice, building community capacity and ownership, and viewing climate adaptation as opportunity to create systems worth building regardless of climate pressures. Implementation requires technical innovation, policy support, adequate financing, and most critically, collective will to pursue transformation rather than merely managing decline.